My dad.
We are talking about Miranda Vale. This one is directed and written by Levin Garbish and stars Annabel Barrett as Miranda. This is a bizarre little B-movie love story with a kind of fantasy, almost horror twist in a way. So it focuses on Miranda, who is this young girl, seemingly kind of average, and one day she comes afoul of this guy who is a aspiring serial killer, as in he's kind of building up to kill his first victim. We see that he's already sort of kidnapped girls but can't quite bring himself to pull the trigger yet, but Miranda, he is intending to be his first full-on kill, and he takes her out to his kind of like his murder shack out in the middle of the desert, and he's torturing her for a while, and then ultimately decides to kill her. But to his surprise and Miranda's surprise, she instantly resurrects, and no matter how many times he tries to kill her, she just instantly comes back and is seemingly fine. And thus follows the story main then, where we have both these characters seemingly not knowing what to do with this kind of situation. As in, this guy's been trying to kill her and she can't die, but she kind of feels somewhat of he's the only person that will, as a kind of who could really believe this kind of situation, because obviously he's the kind of the one that was there. And thus begins this kind of like this relationship between these two characters, and along the way we meet a smattering of other bizarre characters as well. So let's talk about what I think works first of all. I think Annabel Barrett is a extremely likeable actress, I must say, giving a very sort of like likeable every woman kind of role here to the role of a Miranda. I think very, very kind of likeable sort of character actor. And the character that she's portraying, you kind of get where she's coming from in how she's kind of dealing with this. And I thought her performance was actually very, very good. It's kind of slightly comedic. This is somewhat of a dark comedy, I suppose. But nonetheless, I thought she did a good job of really making you believe the character of where she's kind of going and things like this. And Soren, who is the kind of the serial killer, not to such a degree, but still I thought his character was, still quite an interesting character that you kind of ultimately begin to kind of root for him, through a period of time, and you kind of want him to be able to overcome these kind of urges and things like that. And the mystery itself is somewhat intriguing. You think what's kind of going on here. On a technical level, I would say that the movie is very well shot. This kind of feeling where that these two characters are having this kind of the initial part of their journey out in the kind of the middle of nowhere echoes the sense of isolation that both of these characters are feeling. One because they're a serial killer who is hearing voices in his head and kind of feels like he can never really have a real connection. And the other one who's just discovered this kind of like incredible secret, doesn't quite know where it's come from, and she theorises she could be an alien and what have you. So they both feel a sense of isolation. So the kind of the visuals there, out in this kind of desert without anyone around, really kind of, draws that into kind of focus. And the movie is like undeniably quirky, as we have these kind of variety of other sort of characters with somewhat of an animal motif kind of pop up, each one seemingly a little bit kind of bizarre and off kilter and kind of what's kind of going on there. But then that kind of leads me into my negatives here, because I don't feel this movie really knows where it's going. The premise is quite intriguing and the hook is quite strong. And you're thinking, wow, this is kind of quite an interesting little development, how these characters are going to kind of move forward. But I never really feel the movie does move forward. It seems quite directionless once we kind of have that initial shock of kind of what's going on, and these kind of characters seemingly kind of tied together to a certain degree. I feel that the movie doesn't really quite know where to go with it. And we have these kind of like these little bizarre vignettes almost, with these sort of little side characters that will pop up that are kind of quirky, but and then there is a quasi explanation about who they are, but nonetheless, that is not particularly satisfying. And I've got to be honest with you, it feels like it's being quirky for quirky's sake. And then the movie, I just don't think really has any direction after that. It just kind of feels meandering, and to be honest with you, directionless. I also have to say, I think some of the kind of the cast in the smaller roles struggle a little bit. In particular, Miranda's parents, who I have to say didn't feel like their acting was particularly kind of good. Let me just put it like that. So ultimately, this movie is a somewhat quirky, weird love story. And I think the strength of it lies between certainly Annabel Barrett, who I think gives a charming performance, and I say to a degree her kind of counterpart as well. But the narrative here really just kind of like loses stream and feels like it's just kind of like someone's had this idea. Oh yeah, what happens if this girl can't die until who meets a serial killer? But then doesn't know where to go with it, and then the subsequent kind of like little misadventures that we go on seem let's have some weird quirky stuff happening, but we won't really we're basically kind of vague and kind of weird just because that's what we want to do, and you kind of feel somewhat unsatisfied by the kind of the narrative here. Overall, it's a good idea and it's a likeable character, but as a story, it really does lack. So I'll give this one a 5 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.